Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. It is Wednesday, October 19th, and we are continuing our conversations with the candidates for the general election. Today, October 19th, is the first day of early voting in the state of Rhode Island, and the general election is coming up on November 7th. A few housekeeping notes. Visit vote.ri.gov. Vote.ri.gov to take a look at your sample ballot, which is I have on my other screen here. And you can find out where you can early vote. You can find out if you're registered to vote and then panic. And you can also take a look at that sample ballot and see all of the different races. For example, today we were in Portsmouth. They're going to be voting for Representative Congress District 1, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, all the way down. And then you have quite the list of candidates for Town Council, School Committee, and then some state questions on the back. So vote.ri.gov is a great resource to take those names and get informed about the candidates and the names you see on there before you go to vote. You can visit whatsupnoop.com to find all of our conversations with the candidates. We've been chatting with candidates from Portsmouth all week long, and we'll continue to as we make our way through this week. He is J. Mark Ryan, and he is a Democrat candidate up for town council and among 12 for 7 seats. Quick count there, J. Mark Ryan, but I got that right?
That sounds correct.
And you are the 4th down. Any love for the number 4?
Not really. I was never told that it was my lucky number.
Okay.
Let's see, April. It's a nice month, but yeah, no, 4 doesn't really work any magic for me.
Well, you could vote, and then the number 4, wow. J. Mark Ryan.
Your second career, political consultant.
Oh. My political career in anything to do with politics is quickly coming to an end here as I try to finish 70 interviews this month. We've done this before. Tell us a little bit about yourself professionally, personally, and then about your time on the town council.
Okay. Well, nothing really exciting to tell. I've lived in Rhode Island for most of my life. In Portsmouth since 1991. I actually have to admit I actually grew up in Middletown, so that makes me something of a carpetbagger by Portsmouth standards. But I went to college. I met a woman with very neat handwriting who I copied her notes in philosophy class, and I wound up marrying her. Or she married me. I don't know which really had the initiative there. Linda Uchifusa, who's also running for office. She has been on the council with me for the last 6 years, is now running for state senate. I went to medical school at Brown, worked actually in San Francisco for a couple of years, and then we decided for various reasons, including affordable housing and a good school system, we came back to Portsmouth in 1991. And we raised our 3 kids. They all went through Portsmouth schools, and we've lived here in Portsmouth ever since. As far as politically, I was really never much involved, but one thing that has kind of impelled me into this area more and more is the fact that it's become more and more difficult as a physician to actually do my job. It's difficult to get tests ordered that I want for people I'm trying to take care of. It's difficult for me to find medications that they can afford. It's difficult for me to consult other physicians because of an increasingly aggressive and, to my mind, destructive intrusion by the private insurance industry into the practice of medicine in this country. So this was kind of more a professional annoyance, which I and other physicians would just be complaining to each other about, over lunch or whatever. But then about several years ago, this kind of grumpy man from Vermont started yelling about national health insurance and the fact that it was available in pretty much every civilized country other than the United States, and that maybe we ought to think about doing that. And in fact, I had actually joined a doctors group called Physicians for a National Health Program about 20 years ago now, that wants to do that very thing. We are fighting to reform our healthcare system so that Americans are born with health insurance the way, say, Canadians are. And no matter what happens, you don't lose it. You always have health insurance all your life. So there's never an inability to see a physician. That ability to receive treatment when you need it is guaranteed. We're the only industrialized country that does not have that system in some form or another. And so when Bernie Sanders started saying we really should do this, it was the first time that somebody who might actually have been elected president was advocating this since Harry Truman in 1948. And so we got involved in the Sanders campaign for that reason. And when he failed to win, the nomination and election, one thing he said, which sort of made sense to me, was, well, just because this issue has not succeeded yet, that's no reason to now give up and go back to your private lives. You should remain engaged in public debate. And so we thought, well, we're probably not going to get elected to Congress where we could actually try to pass this legislation, but we can get elected to lower office where at least we're talking to people and where we can become involved with the community and, help things on a local level, but also remain involved politically. And so, as elected officials, we are recognized as such by the state Democratic Party, which does give us the ability to go to their meetings and occasionally advocate issues that we think ought to be brought to the fore. Haven't had a whole lot of success doing that so far, but again, just because you don't succeed the first time doesn't mean you should just give up and stop trying. So my wife Linda and I both ran for the town council, which we thought was reasonably within our grasp in 2016. And in a fit of incredible bad judgment, the voters of Portsmouth elected us both and made the same mistake in 2018 and again in 2020. And we figure since they obviously are not paying attention, I'm going to try to have them make the same mistake again this year.
Fittable bad judgment, grumpy old man, big Mark.
Yeah, that's true. I could be describing myself, couldn't I? Yeah.
Oh, I meant just things that you had said.
Oh, right. Well, actually, the funny about grumpy old man, I actually found myself to be the chair of the Rhode Island chapter of Physicians for a National Health Program by another error of judgment. I went to one of their meetings. This is about 10 years ago now. And the people who do the research for that organization were just laying out in lecture format just one horrible fact after another about what's going on with Americans who need healthcare in the United States and what happens to them when they try to seek it. And it was basically like watching some sort of statistical analysis of the shower scene from Psycho. And after having to listen to this for like an hour, I just was so emotionally distraught. I went out to the lobby and the guy was checking. There was a guy out there as the secretary for the organization checking people in. And I said, all right, you guys win. I'll do something for the organization besides sending in dues money. Who's running PNHP in Rhode Island? And the guy goes, you are. So sometimes bringing yourself to attention can have unforeseen and potentially fatal consequences.
Yeah, talking about bringing attention. I don't normally do this, but I'm going to pop this up because it's a medical. I think it's a medical question. I'm trying to understand it, but maybe you can help me answer Susan's question here. I really don't like the fact that so many doctors only take cash, no insurance, and insurance companies no longer allow you to choose doctors in certain health groups. And now Lifespan refuses to talk to other doctors out of their practice group. I don't know if I completely.
Yeah, no, Susan has identified several horrible consequences of our fractured healthcare system. So some doctors take money and nothing but money. There's two big groups where that's happening. One is psychiatry, and part of the reason for it is that if you're a psychiatrist, trying to get the insurance company to pay you is painful and lengthy and frequently unsuccessful. And psychiatry has felt for a long time that, really psychiatric problems aren't real problems. So people don't really need to see these doctors. So I know several psychiatrists who no longer deal with the insurance companies at all, but instead collect the fee from the person directly, which of course, what's the point of having health insurance if your doctor doesn't take it? The other big group the category that I can think of who don't take payment, who require payment up front are primary care doctors who've decided to go into what are politely termed concierge practices. And why are there concierge practices? Well, A, they're allowed. B, they're economically viable. And C, the reason why these doctors do it by and large is they are tired of having their time wasted by having to meet endless requirements in terms of billing, in terms of documentation, requirements that are mainly required by private insurance companies. Again, you don't find concierge practices, I think, in probably any other country, any other industrialized country, because there's no need for them. Doctors in those countries have to deal with one insurance company, which is the national health insurance, and the billing, the requirements, they are uniform. There's not multiple companies with multiple requirements. And so Canadian physicians, for instance, spend 1/3 the time and 1/3 the money that American physicians do trying to collect reimbursement from their insurance companies. So why does Lifespan not talk to anybody outside their own group? Well, part of that is it's a slightly different issue. First of all, of course, you'll notice that, for instance, Massachusetts hospitals, the MGH group and Brigham and Women's actually have physician offices in Rhode Island. Cardiology offices primarily, some others as well. Why is that? Well, cardiology brings in patients who often require procedures that are highly reimbursed. And so if you in Boston can expand the universe of people who are coming to your facility for their cardiac catheterizations and stents and whatnot by having offices in Rhode Island, then that is much to your financial advantage. So, Lifespan wants people who need procedures for those procedures to be done at Lifespan. And so they're not really all that happy about communicating with physicians who are representing or work with hospitals that are in Massachusetts. Another reason why they don't talk to other people, for instance, give you an example, Lifespan, the Rhode Island Hospital is connected to Women and Infants Hospital by tunnels, and the staff frequently go between the two hospitals to see patients. And yet, Women and Infants is in a different hospital group. It's Care New England. Rhode Island is Lifespan. So they have different business offices that don't talk to each other, and they are on different electronic medical records that are not compatible with one another. Part of the reason for that is just, again, the vicious economics of medical reimbursement in this country that makes hospitals adversaries of one another. And another reason is that the way the electronic medical record was introduced and made mandatory was in a bill passed in 2004 under George W. Bush, which was written by insurance company executives. And had they been doing this for the purported reason of improving medical care, they would have convened a task force to roll out a standard electronic medical record that everyone could have adopted, that would have been compatible across hospitals, across states, across care delivery systems. But instead, they said, the Congress of 2004 said, "Oh, no. We'll let software companies just write their own programs, and of course, the marketplace, as it always does, will come up with the best solution." Well, what they did was create chaos. So there's a welter of different EMRs that don't talk to each other, that actually impair communication. And this was done because there was no desire and no overarching authority to try to see that decisions that were made that had a profound effect on the delivery of care were actually being made in the interests of people seeking care and not financial institutions that derive profits from care. So long-winded answer, but I blame Susan because she raised so many issues in her email. It's her fault.
We could talk healthcare forever, and I might have an idea. I know you're very busy with your time on Portsmouth Town Council, as well as being a doctor. But playing off of the What's Up Noop, we can start a new series called What's Up Doc, an hour with J. Mark Ryan, and we could do this a couple times a month.
I'll have my carrot ready.
Yes. How many doctors are in public office in Rhode Island? Serving on town councils?
That is a good question to which I do not know the answer. Let's see. I know there is an optometrist who is, I think he's a state rep. I know there was a doctor on the Kingston Town Council. I don't know if he's still there. But yeah, overall, no, I really don't know. That's not a factoid I've kept track of.
It's all right. I was just thinking about it. I mean, I could talk about how reforming healthcare for days here, but what are some of the other big challenges, issues happening in Portsmouth right now that you're hearing about? We can even call them opportunities.
Right. Well, again, I think that's a saying from Sun Tzu, right? In chaos, there is opportunity. So. Anytime you get more than two people together, problems start to occur. And, in a town, there are problems that are created by, you need some way for people's interactions with each other to be regulated. And then, of course, there's this other small thing where we're living in an extremely, labile planet, which is, who's a lot of the physical factors affecting our town are changing. The sea levels are rising. Rainfall is changing its pattern. We had a record-breaking drought this summer, followed by one of the wettest autumns so far that we've seen. This is happening in other parts of the country, but obviously, the Portsmouth Town Council doesn't have any say over the fact that Salt Lake in Utah is now almost completely evaporated. But sea level rise is a big issue, and climate change is a big issue. We have in Portsmouth, we have actually there's a number of people, but particularly people living in two large sub-communities in our town, Island Park and Common Defense Point. Those are very low-lying areas. And even without sea level rise, if we get smacked by another hurricane, in the 1938 variety, people in those areas are going to have to evacuate. There's going to be a lot of challenges to getting them resettled, and we have to be able to deal with that. Fortunately, we got an incredibly capable emergency management director, Ray Perry, who is helping to analyze the vulnerabilities of our town and come up with strategies to deal with sort of natural disasters when they occur. Among other things, we managed to get a $300,000 grant from the Rhode Island Resiliency Foundation to address some of these things. For instance, Common Defense Point has 2 points of access that allow residents to get into that area from other parts of the town. Both of them are rather low lying. One actually goes under an old railroad bridge. And, these 2 access points have actually been flooded in the past few years. So we're coming up with solutions to keep those access points open so that if we do encounter a 38 style hurricane, which, I don't know if people remember, that storm moved from Florida to New England in 12 hours. Wow. And brought an enormous storm surge with it. You can still see the markers all over Providence as to how high the water got. So we may find ourselves needing to deal with a storm of that magnitude in a very short amount of time. And so having an emergency management association director, besides having a professional fire department and a professional police department to help us deal with this stuff, is an incredibly important thing. So we're very lucky. One thing that we have managed to do, partially because we've got the town council, I think, for the last few years has been very reasonable about stuff like this. And partially we've managed to hire a town administrator who is incredibly competent. Mr. Rayner actually worked in the Pentagon, in the DOD, And so he's used to handling budgets that are rather larger than the Portsmouth Town budget, and is, like a lot of Navy officers, is incredibly well organized. So he and staff have been doing a really great job in coming up with scenarios and ways to deal with them, so that we can deal with these kinds of crises when they occur. So that's one challenge. Fortunately, at this point, theoretical, but something we have to worry about. Other things that face Portsmouth: rising costs of everything, really. Energy prices are going up, housing prices are going up, food prices are going up. And Portsmouth is not Silicon Valley. We don't have all that many, multi-million-dollar paying salaries being earned by citizens of the town. And it's a challenge to try to figure out how to keep the town affordable, how to keep housing affordable. And, particularly vulnerable group are senior citizens. Now, these are folks who, many of them have fixed incomes and are certainly not earning a lot of money. God forbid, you need to rely on Social Security, which, is barely adequate to cover like food costs. And so, one of the things that we've done to start to try to deal with is to look at things like housing prices, zoning. One thing we're going to have to think about, and I'm not really sure what the best solution to this is the number of houses that are being bought up as investment opportunities by people who don't live in town, to be turned into, Airbnbs and vacation rentals and things like that. I mean, I have no objection to people making money, but in an area where people need to live, and in order to do that, they need to be able to buy a house. Allowing housing prices to be just relentlessly pushed skyward it's just not acceptable. It's not what what town government ought to be allowing to do. So that's I think something we're going to have to grapple with over the next few years. In the meantime, in a very small way, I guess, we did manage to reach an agreement with the developer, with Church Community Properties. We have a 100-year-old school in Portsmouth, the Ann Hutchinson School, which has been used for a number of years as our local senior center, which is great because at least it gives the seniors a dry place to congregate for activities and meals and things like that. But the building is just way too old, and it needs a major overhaul. And one of the other great things that was done since Mr. Rayner's come into, to become our town administrator is that we conducted an engineering assessment by an engineering group called the Jacobson Group about 5 years ago, looking at all the town properties and trying to figure out which ones are in the most need of repair, how much would it cost to repair them, as a way of gathering information to allow us to make an intelligent list, a way to prioritize which town properties do we need to refurbish and which basically are never going to be usable, and we will need to figure out what to do with them. So prior to that, it's kind of, we did what I think most communities do, which was kind of defer maintenance on these things because it's expensive to maintain old buildings. And prior councils, in an effort to not kill the town voters with ever rising taxation, kind of deferred maintenance. Well, that only works for so long. So with the Jacobson report, we were able to figure out how much it would cost to repair every building the town owns. And for various reasons, Portsmouth owns a rather disproportionately large number of properties. It's just historically what's happened. In some cases, it's worked out well. We have the Glen Manor House, which actually has been turned into an enterprise fund. It's a wedding venue. So that actually has been a good thing. But, others like the Coggeshall School, which is decaying literally, and the Hutchinson School, we haven't really, the Hutchinson School we've been able to use as the senior center, but, its fire suppression system is outdated. It needs to be replaced. The building itself needs major work. So as I was saying about, 20 minutes ago, we managed to reach an agreement with Church Community Properties where they will obtain grant money, which is what they do, to sort of demolish the old unusable section of the building. Interestingly, Hutchinson is the oldest part of the building is about 100 years old, but that framework was built very solidly, and that actually is useful. The newer addition is decaying and is really not salvageable. So the old building, where I guess they actually cared about what they were doing, we can actually gut and turn into a new senior center, which won't be full of mold as the current building is, will be waterproofed, which the current building is not, and can actually be used and turned into a light, healthy space for our senior center, which the current building is kind of fails in a lot of ways to do. In addition to that, church community is going to expand on the property and actually create 50 sort of rent control, price controlled dwelling units for senior citizens. So we'll actually, that is not enough to, sort of to address the town's entire needs, but it starts to address it. And I think it maybe provides a good model as to what we can look into going forward. The town has, in this case, the ability to contract with a private entity to help to address our need for a low-income housing. There are probably other, and in fact, I know there are other companies out there, other institutions, other grant writing, like the Van Buren Foundation, who will actually fund projects like this. And so I think we, as a town, really, and with a real need for these things, can actually make use of these things, because the alternative is to either not address the problem or sort of start to say, well, we'll just tax our citizens to death trying to deal with them, which is really not a viable option. So those are, I think, the cost of living, housing, and then the overarching concern as to how do we make our town safe, and what is our plan for natural disasters? New England weather could be described as kind of an ongoing natural disaster, but occasionally it gets worse. And when it really gets at its worst, how will we address it? And I think these are all things that we as a town council can actually address.
How often is your phone or email buzzing in regards to the Mayflower cable?
Not as much as you'd think, but there's definitely a high level of concern about this, particularly since the developers have proposed, and the Energy Setting Board may well rule, that the power transmission cable is going to be basically tunneled through Portsmouth in order to reach the kind of terminus at the old Breton Point power plant. I think we'll be getting a lot more calls as this plan is shaped up, as the state's Energy Siting Board finally says that's fine. Feel free to drill a big long tunnel through Teddy's Beach, up along Boyd's Lane, and out into Narragansett Bay, north of Portsmouth. So this is, again, I am absolutely in favor of wind power. It's non-polluting. And if you look at the experience of, say, Block Island, which almost alone among Rhode Island communities will not be seeing an increase in the rates that they pay to National Grid or Rhode Island Energy or whatever it's called these days. Wind power has a real potential for solving a lot of our energy needs. And so I think, again, we're going to get more and more and more of these projects being planned and being proposed and being enacted. So since this particular one is going to directly affect Portsmouth, and it's, from what they're telling us, the drilling and construction that will directly affect Portsmouth, they say it could go on for 2 seasons, which I interpret as being 2 years. We need to find a way to protect our citizens, to mitigate the effect on the lives of our citizenry, and the town, I think, needs to be reimbursed to help to deal with these problems. So I think one of the things that we need to do, and we've actually retained legal counsel, other communities that have been directly affected by these projects have actually managed to make deals with the developers where when the town's property is directly affected, the town gets some kind of compensation. So I think one thing that we can do for for our taxpayers is if they have to put up with all this drilling and construction and stuff, we should have some way of mitigating the effects, and the town ought to be reimbursed for the inconvenience and the noise and everything else. And that's what we're hoping to retain. Well, what we're retaining legal counsel to try to effect.
A couple questions happening to the south of Portsmouth and Newport and Middletown. One being cannabis, which Portsmouth won't have that question on their ballot because they're already kind of in the business already. And the other one being school regionalization. How close are you watching that?
Very. Again, the consolidation of services has the ever, constant charm of, economies of scale. So if you can combine things into larger entities, theoretically, you can cut down on overhead and make, for instance, with the school systems, you can consolidate the offices, you can consolidate administration, and perhaps have more money to actually educate kids. We are watching it with interest. One of the problems we have, and what has been a kind of a barrier for us to enter into these negotiations with Newport, for instance, is that, we've had problems maintaining town properties, but one set of properties that we have done a really good job maintaining, and I can't take credit for this because this has been going on since before I was in the town council. Portsmouth has been very consistent in maintaining its public school infrastructure. We've just passed a bond a couple of years ago or a year ago, to continue to refurbish and improve the actual physical facilities in which our children are educated. So one of the for Portsmouth, a barrier to consolidating regionally is the fact that Newport and to some degree Middletown haven't done as good a job at maintaining their school buildings as Portsmouth has, and we don't really want to take on their debt. We have enough debt of our own, so we'll watch it with interest. And down the road, if it looks like the benefits outweigh the potential financial liabilities, we'll definitely. I mean, the door is never shut on this question. We'll definitely consider a larger regionalization if we feel that it is in the interests of Portsmouth children and their parents.
I want to make sure I watch the time because I'm not sure if you have any patients waiting for you. 12 people on the ballot. Why should people put a bubble, fill in the bubble next to your name once again?
Wow, that's a really good question.
Never knew it was coming, right?
Yeah.
Well, why should people vote for you?
Right. Because I'm just an honest and wonderful person.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Well, why?
Let me see what Linda said about that. If she said that, let's see.
She didn't say it about me. I'll tell you. I'm pretty sure about that. No. Why vote for me? Again, one of the things that we've seen over the last 20 years in the town are various escapades where people have decided to, take initiatives which have not worked out well for the town. I think about the tent meeting in 2006, where a group of people in Portsmouth who were, reasonably alarmed about the ever increasing taxation they were facing, decided to hold a tent meeting under an old article in the town charter, which allowed for a tent meeting to be held if the town, if there was no other opportunity for this question. They unilaterally voted to chop $1 million off the school budget, which immediately put the town in violation of the Carollo Act, which required our school department to sue the town to recover that money. So, again, there was another decision made a few years later where the town vacated a property owner's right to a right of way over another person's land. I don't want to get into the details as to why they made that decision, but the point was they were in the room with counsel for the town of Portsmouth, who is telling them not to do this, and they did it anyway. So I guess one reason to vote for me, and I think I know the Democrats on, I don't want to endorse the Republicans, obviously, but the we are reasonable. So, we listen to advice from people who know what they're talking about. When it's a question of a legal issue, we will listen to counsel for the town and you try to act according to the law. We know, we live in the town, we know how expensive things are. We know the burden of taxation. We have been as cautious as we can at allowing taxes to increase. And I think that's been reflected. Tax increases in the town of Portsmouth have consistently been below the rate of inflation. And in fact, we're in the lowest tertile for taxes for any town in Rhode Island that maintains a professional fire department and its own school system. So, for the last 6 years, this has been done under the purview of, quote, tax and spend Democrats. So I would have people vote for me because I'm reasonable. I will, again, I'm a physician. I'm used to trying to amass data and making a reasonable judgment based on it. I don't see why you would do anything different if you're sitting in a town councilor's seat. And so that's why I would ask people to vote for me, because I try to make decisions reasonably based on the available evidence.
As if you didn't have enough to worry about, in the chambers of Portsmouth Town Hall, just I have to ask you because you're a doctor, but we have a lot going on right now. COVID, monkeypox, people not getting their flu shots for a couple of years. I just wanted to give you an opportunity in case you had anything you wanted to share or advocate for there.
I deal with this every day. So, several years ago, anytime somebody comes in for an annual physical, I have a checklist of things I'll ask them. And among those things is, have you received recommended routine vaccinations, flu shots, pneumonia vaccine, tetanus, and, if you're of a certain age, shingles vaccine. And now, of course, with this epidemic, have you had a COVID vaccine? And a few years ago, they were bland questions and people would answer them blandly, yes or no. Now, if you ask, have you had your COVID vaccine? Frequently, you get this sort of angry response as though I'm accusing the person of something. And I think one thing that I've been very alarmed at is over the last few years, and I think part of it is just from the stress of having to live through an epidemic, and part of it is just, I don't know, some people seem to like to stir things up and get everyone all riled up. But the vaccines that are available there are based on the best available data we have. I will remind people that over human history, one of the major reasons for human beings to die was a disease called smallpox. And in 1972, the last recorded case of smallpox occurred in sub-Saharan Sudan because the United States, funding the World Health Organization, engaged upon a program of global vaccination so that one of the greatest scourges of humanity no longer exists. Vaccines were, the idea was begun with Edward Jenner back in the 1700s. And I don't even want to tell you what he did to people, but that was the beginning of the idea that you could actually induce immunity in people without forcing them to contract the disease. And the vaccines that we have are all very well researched. They're all quite safe. And again, it is much better to get a flu shot than to get influenza, particularly some years when it's an antigen shift year and we have a particularly virulent strain. This is not a shift year, but it's still a really good idea to get a flu shot. So I would ask people to turn off the internet for a little while and not listen to all this crazy misinformation that seems to be flooding people's homes. And, again, your doctor is generally not trying to kill you. And most doctors I know, there are exceptions, I will say that, but 99.9% of responsible physicians will tell their patients, please get vaccinated against common diseases that are preventable. There's really, you may have particular reasons. You had Guillain-Barré from flu shot. Okay, no more flu shots for you. But except for the very small minority of people who actually have a medical reason why they should not be vaccinated, please listen to your doctor and get vaccinated.
Excellent. Well, thank you for. I know I put you on the spot there, and
that was a underhand pitch, sir.
Yeah.
Ask me about medical marijuana. Now we can get into some problems.
I wish we had the time. We'll have to come back, but and do this again.
Absolutely.
Yes, we'll do it again. And,
as you've been doubtless noticed, I am able to blather on forever. So, yeah, feel free.
Yes. We'll get a sponsor for What's Up, Doc, and we'll get it rolling here shortly.
Happy to do it.
All right, J. Mark Ryan. Vote for J. Mark Ryan on your Portsmouth Town Council ballot starting today through November 8th. We wish you the very best of luck.
Thanks so much. You have a good day.
Thank you. And that is J. Mark Ryan, and he is seeking your vote. Fill in the bubble next to his name on November 8th or anytime between now and then. If you missed any portion of this interview, you want to watch it again, share it, listen to it as a podcast, compare and contrast the Portsmouth Town Council candidates. You can do all of that on whatsupnuke.com. Thanks for watching.